Hey, thanks for checking out The Solid Verbal. Now would be a great time to subscribe to the channel for college football content all off season long.
Welcome back to the Solid Verbal, boys and girls. My name is Ty Hildenbrand, that fine gentleman over there, the one, the only, always, the incomparable, live from Chicago, Illinois.
Yes, sir.
Dan Rubenstein. Sir, how are you?
I'm going to tell you something, Ty. I'm wonderful. I cannot wait, to get into spring games, to get into news. We have a number of teams, new coaches. We have so much to get into because we've been doing these year one debriefs, and the sport has still been happening around us in the off season with transfer portal stuff, whatever, injuries. I have adjusted my stance on spring practice and spring games, Ty, because for the longest time I've been like, well, you got to take it with a grain of salt. Injuries matter, but whatever happens in spring games, it doesn't really have any bearing on the season or whatever. No.
Yeah.
I need my tasty morsels, Ty, because we're not getting that much right now at this point of the year. But also I think about my time at Oregon and how much I loved going to spring games because it's spring training, right? It's going to an outdoor sporting event. Hopefully you can put on some shorts if you live somewhere relatively warm in mid to late April, and you just get to bask in the glory of pads hitting each other, sunshine, and just sitting in a football stadium. So I am totally out on the attitude of like, it's just spring practice. Well, sure, you take it with a certain degree of salt, but for some reason, and maybe it's just because Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson are all going to have new full-time starters at quarterback for whatever reason, I don't know. I'm tingling more than usual, Ty. I don't know about you.
I am tingling more than usual, and I've always tingled. Always tingled
sure,
for
certainly.
Spring football. I remember being up at Penn State, and Penn State, much like Oregon, is in that weird weather bracket where it's cloudy most of the time.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
For sure.
But it was always right around the mid to late April timeframe when the weather would break.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd start having those randomly sunny, warm days on a Saturday. Some of my best memories in college way back when.
Mm-hmm.
Spring football, the blue-white game, a random sunny day in late April. Everybody was out there tailgating. And in many cases, we did not go into the game. It was all about the tailgate.
Great.
But nonetheless, it was, as you said, a morsel of college football, a morsel of the culture that makes this sport tick. So, yeah, we're going to talk about spring games. We're going to talk about some news.
Yeah.
We have been doing the first year debriefs for the last month or so.
Mm-hmm.
We learned a lot. I learned a lot, to say the least. Go back, listen to all those episodes. We did like 13 of them, Dan.
Yeah.
We really got our feet wet.
Love it.
On all things first-year coaches. Hopefully, if you go back and listen to it after the fact, you can learn something as well. But yeah, we're going to dive into the news, and we're going to talk about the things that we've missed over the last couple weeks or so.
Mm-hmm.
Don't forget to hit subscribe to The Solid Verbal. Follow The Solid Verbal wherever it is you get your podcasts. We do 2 public episodes every week. We also offer bonus content at verballers.com, VERBALLERS.com. That's our Patreon. You get a bunch of bonus perks in addition to bonus content.
Yeah.
Last but certainly not least, make sure you follow along on social media, not the least of which is YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and check out the newsletter, quickslants.solidverbal.com. I believe that is all the housekeeping that I have for today, sir.
Yeah,
Where would you like to start?
I should also add, Ty, let me just jump in right here. Living where I live makes me appreciate seeing the joy on people's faces in Austin, Texas, or Clemson, South Carolina, or Auburn, Alabama, as they get to bask in the sunshine. And I don't really get to as of yet. I got a brief window last week, so I'm happy for the people that get out and get to enjoy that sweet, sweet vitamin D, Ty. Do you want to start with some news? We have some news.
Let's start with news. We have breaking news. The pipes are rested. I was ready for that. I've been ready for that for weeks on end now. So the big news in college football, we're going to talk about spring stuff as well, but the big news, really big news in college football is the clock.
Yeah.
The clock rules. So for the first time since 1968, the clock in a college football game will not stop on a first down. The exceptions are the last 2 minutes of either half, right?
Mm-hmm.
Second quarter, fourth quarter, last 2 minutes, it'll stop then. But otherwise, it won't. Again, first time in forever that's been the case. I'll have you know that the average length of a college football game last season was a smidge shy of 3 hours and 30 minutes. It was 3 hours and 27 minutes. That's up about 10 minutes from 5 years ago.
Okay.
The whole rationale behind instituting this change is they've identified more plays as the reason that games have progressively gotten longer over the years. So the rules committee expects this is going to eliminate a handful of plays. They said 7 to 8 plays, and they've done the math. They think that it reduces the length of an average game by about 7 minutes.
And
right?
I presume they didn't do research on commercial time and halftime.
They did not, interestingly enough, they did not do the research on the commercial time.
That was not their data set of choice. Continue.
They were not given that data set.
Yeah.
So it is notable, right? Because this is a big deal. People were very opinionated about this when we posted it out on social media. Mm-hmm. It is not a drastic change. We are seeing a drastic change right now in Major League Baseball, where they were very aggressive.
Yeah.
This is not a baseball show. We're going to do a baseball off-topic show shortly, but games are shorter by like a half hour.
Is that true already this season? A month or so in? Yeah.
It's something like 26 minutes.
And people like it.
Okay. People like it.
Okay.
Now, baseball's not a sport governed by the clock. It's
Correct.
not a timed event like football, like soccer, like basketball, like most of the other sports. But it's notable that they were very aggressive. College football here, I think, is just trying to wet the beak in a sense. They're trying to see if they can curtail this a little bit. The biggest argument that we got against, and I wanted to get your reaction to this, and this is just anecdotally from social media accounts and things that we've heard online.
Right.
It'll mean fewer comebacks. That is what people are saying.
Right.
Fewer comebacks. Now, I don't buy that logic.
Okay.
Because it cuts both ways, right? Maybe it will reduce your chances as the trailing team to come back and win the game. It also reduces your chance leading team to build a big lead.
Mm-hmm.
So it sort of works in both directions, in my view. Do you have an argument against this for this? Where do you stand with clock rules?
Was there anything with out of bounds related? It's just first downs, right? And so
just first downs.
First downs, and again, correct me if I'm wrong. I've been watching the sport a long time, but I just want to get this right. Before, it was stop the clock until the ball is spotted, correct?
Correct. That's correct.
So it's not like it fully stopped the clock until it was snapped. It was until it was spotted. I saw something that was going to eliminate an estimated 8 plays a game, or over the course of the season, again, if my math is correct, regular season, 96 plays per person. Correct. If they're playing every single play per game, or it's an average of 8 plays per player, based on average participation in games. And it was cited that because we're going to a 12-team playoff soon, that you're adding multiple games. And so this is a way, I think the word was exposure to potential injury. So in the name of player safety, which, look, I'm okay with, trying to look out for players. I think that's a valuable motivation.
I don't totally buy that argument. I think it conveniently fits here.
Sure.
I don't think that's the reason they're doing it. The reason they're doing this is, in my opinion, to tidy up the TV windows.
Okay.
And to try to trim a few minutes off here and there to make things fit a little bit more neatly, since this is a TV sport in this day and age.
So who does this advantage? That's the question to you. What types of teams, what types of coaches, and who does it disadvantage? And this is just a guess from both of us. So my thinking is, if you are a very successful possession-oriented offense, think the last, the best of recent Stanford, the best of recent service academy type schools who can get out to a 14-3 lead with long pronounced drives, the best of Bill Snyder era Kansas State, right? With their long pronounced drives. It seems like that's going to advantage those types of now dinosaur-y type teams, that it's still, I think, really smart to be a very good running team. But it's going to disadvantage teams that screw up in the red zone a lot, because you're going to take a lot of time off the clock and not score or settle for 3. It's going to disadvantage more conservative play callers. I think it's fascinating. And I think it's going to disadvantage coaches who are terrible with their timeouts, because now those, if the clock is moving more rapidly and you need to be able to organize your game mid-game and you are bad at, timeout management and clock management, it's going to make things even more difficult. So I think it's okay that new rules punish coaches who are bad at the clock and bad at key decisions. I think it's probably one of those things that we're going to look back on as, it's not nearly as big a deal as perhaps some of us thought at the time. But I'm curious to see what some of the unforeseen effects are going to be.
Well, I saw on Twitter, our friend Spencer Hall pointed out he can't wait to see who screws this up.
Yeah, that's the big thing. Yeah.
You know, there will be coaches who are just not used to it, and college coaches are notorious for poor time management. And I would expect we'll see a little bit of that. The team that came to mind first as being, I think, in a really advantageous spot, Michigan.
Sure.
Michigan with
and
its bruising style of rushing offense that it has fully steered into and built the plane out of the last 2 years, rushing for 4 or 5 yards a carry in some cases. Mm-hmm. The teams that were really good, really possession-oriented, and really just hard-nosed running teams, even Georgia, right? These teams that know how to just suck the life out of you with possession. This benefits them marginally,
sure,
in my view. Of course, it's not going to affect Tennessee all that much because Tennessee plays fast regardless.
Right.
But I think there will be some...
Well, it affects Tennessee if they're playing a good team and their offense gets off the field quickly, unsuccessfully. And then, look, they're still going to play quickly, as you said. But, yeah, going 3 and out becomes a little bit more hurtful if you're doing it quickly. Yeah.
Sure. I suppose that's true. So I don't mind the change at all. I do think it's, college football is a sport that, like most sports that people are passionate about, any change is a big deal. Mm-hmm. And you've got a very passionate fan base that wants things to remain in state. I think it's going to be fine. The one thing that I wouldn't mind is if they maybe widened that window at the end of each half from 2 minutes to 4 minutes.
Oh, where they stop it automatically. Yeah.
I wouldn't mind that, but I at least appreciate the spirit of what they're trying here. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's going to affect comebacks. I don't think it's going to affect the game in any kind of super dramatic way. Again, they've done the math. Like you said, 7-8 plays per game is what they're looking to reduce. They say about 7 minutes on average per game. We'll see. The quotes are that they have to live it first to see if they like it.
Right. Sure.
And that's true for pretty much everything. Yep. We will see what comes of the new clock rules here, but there will be new clock rules.
Another another potential change to the way the sport and games are handled in game is, look, if we do think it's going to limit comebacks, then potentially we get no huddle, wide open passing earlier on in games because we have to start the comeback sooner. We see writing on the wall that we can't get a stop, so we're opening up things in the middle of the third quarter instead of 9 minutes left in the fourth quarter. So that seems like a positive in that either you get furious offenses quicker or the game's just out of hand quicker. Like the furious offense starts and it's not going to work and this game is over. Also, I hope to see, and this is everybody, I think, listening to this show feels this way. I think there is a universal truth to college football fandom in that we all hate when coaches with 1:08 left before halftime, 49 seconds left before halftime, just say, you know what? Let's just get into the locker room and figure it out. Let's not keep our foot on the gas, which is something, by the way, last week that Parker talked about, talking TCU, the difference between Sonny Dykes and Gary Patterson. Yep. I remember watching it from a Mario Cristobal team. I think it was when Oregon was at Stanford. Everybody has that moment where you're like, there's 93 seconds in the half left, and you're just playing to get a first down and kneel? This is what we're doing? So if these drives are even more at a premium because of a quicker moving clock, then I think we're going to see more aggression pre-half, especially as we've talked about the middle 8 and things like that become more known. I think that's a positive thing. I think it's absolutely a positive thing.
The big loser here could be Brian Ferentz.
Well, I don't think it changes.
Brian Ferentz, I don't know if you saw the quote, but he said he doesn't expect much to change on the offensive side.
Well, unrelated to the new rule, but yes.
Unrelated to the new rule.
Yeah.
But we know about his performance objectives. Needs to get to a certain threshold to presumably retain his job.
Right.
Both he and his father, Kirk Ferentz, have not necessarily indicated any willingness to make a big change. And now the clock's going to run a little quicker.
Yeah. I also saw that he said he's at peace with the possibility that this is his final season calling plays for Iowa.
I love
it's a bit of a downer of a quote, but yeah.
And maybe the Iowa sabbatical is over now. We can talk about it.
Yeah.
I think they found the one thing that can make the Iowa offense interesting, and that is they've turned it into a reality show.
Sure.
And I'm very excited about this reality show.
The game within the game.
Watch this fall. Yeah. Beautiful. Elsewhere in college football, The Big Ten now has a new commissioner.
Yeah.
Don't want to spend too much time on this because we talk about business subjects on this show and your ears and eyes tend to glaze over. Nobody drive off the road, please.
Mm-hmm.
Tony Petitti is his name. He is a longtime sports media executive. He had a long stint with CBS Sports, long stint with Major League Baseball. He is, and you can go and read the article that Nicole wrote for The Athletic, Nicole Auerbach, but he is viewed in the industry as a really bright guy, a very creative guy, somebody who was one of the forefathers of the BCS during his time at ABC Sports. He has a very, very good resume with respect to putting sports on TV.
Yeah.
And I think this raised just a couple eyebrows around the sport because it very much continued the trend of hiring kind of like newcomers, not necessarily guys with conference experience. Right. We saw that happen with the Pac-12. We saw that happen recently with the Big 12 as well with Brent Yormark. Tony Petitti is not necessarily a guy who's worked in the Big Ten conference or any conference, but his, I think, proximity to the game, his proximity to putting the games on TV, all that stuff was very positive and will definitely play a pretty big role in helping shape this new era that we're going into, which is big money contracts, maybe an expanding footprint of the Big Ten, certainly an expanding 12-team footprint now with the college football playoff. Who knows if it stays at 12 or for how long it stays at 12, depending on the money we're talking about. Mm-hmm. So he seems like a very good guy for this job. What I wrote in the newsletter last Thursday, we can talk a lot about his resume. We talk a lot about how good of a guy he apparently is. His tenure is going to be defined by the fact that he will probably have a decision to make with respect to Oregon and Washington, with Notre Dame as well.
Sure.
And whether or not he decides to expand that Big Ten footprint. That is what's going to define this tenure.
Which was reportedly the continuing dream of Kevin Warren before he became the whatever president of the Chicago Bears.
The sun never sets on the Kevin Warren empire. Just remember that.
Never, ever. It is, it's fascinating, but not surprising that we are talking about the last three major conference commissioner hires being outsiders from the TV and entertainment world. George Kliavkoff at the Pac-12, Brett Yormark at the Big 12, and now Tony Petitti is how you pronounce his name.
I believe that's right.
At the Big 10, because he was also involved with the MLB and a lot of their advanced media and becoming heavily involved in the streaming world with MLB TV, that kind of stuff. Yep. And so major conferences are sending a clear signal that they are hiring television executives for a reason. That job is specifically more than ever morphing into an occupation reliant on media exposure.
Right. You want to make a TV show, hire a TV guy.
If you want to make a TV show, if you want to program TV networks, you got to find somebody who knows not just how to negotiate those deals and what the best deal would be for exposure and money for that specific conference and that specific footprint, but also how to speak to the others, right? On the other side of things. Yeah. This is what we're looking for. This is a carve out we want to make sure that we have in the deal. This is a carve out we want to make sure we don't have in the deal. This is how we future proof ourselves in the world of streaming and over the top and broadcast. And that is, again, not surprising, but it's underscored with a hire like this. And I don't know if it falls to a deputy commissioner or a new role within an athletic department, or not an athletic department, but within a conference where we're like, well, who knows the ins and outs of Title IX? Who knows the ins and outs of how to manage a staff of coaches when Indiana leans on this new commissioner, when Oregon State leans on their commissioner, when Texas Tech leans on their commissioner? What should we do with tennis? What should we do with gymnastics? What should we do with this website? What should we do with the rights? Maybe that's somebody else within the conference office and not necessarily the traditional role that somebody with, high-level athletic administration experience generally had in years past. So just fascinating to see the way that the sport is evolving. And look, nothing stays the same, but, it's all understandable.
It's all understandable, and it is notable because there was some concern, let's say, around how soon the Big Ten would name this commissioner.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when we talked, I think, to Matt Brown about this, it seemed like maybe it wouldn't be till summer.
Right.
So the fact that this is kind of in place now and moving forward, that positions the Big Ten for whatever the hell goes on with the Pac-12 deal.
Sure.
which has been pushed off until summertime. And we'll just see. We'll see what kind of shape that takes on when all is said and done. We've heard a lot of wild rumors, but we'll wait to pass judgment on that front. Tony Petitti, your new commissioner of the Big Ten. We wish him well. So,
sure.
With that being said, the bulk of the news otherwise, Dan, I think is on the spring game front.
Yeah, and transfers. I mean, Bear Alexander, who was a big contributor for the Georgia defensive line last year, had some big moments in the national championship game. He is, and immediately when he entered the portal, Georgia fans were like, what? And then it was immediately like, oh, he's going to USC, everybody. Then he went to USC. That's a shocker, right? It's a shocker when USC is able to land somebody in the portal. But yeah, there've been a couple of those. Florida lost a couple key guys to the portal. I think their leading receiver, because they lost their top two guys, Ricky Pearsall and Justin Shorter, to the NFL. They exhausted their eligibility. So an edge rusher from Florida. Ole Miss lost some guys. Like it's the post-spring portal season. Jordan Hudson, which we talked about for a second on our TCU show. I saw the leading receiver in Colorado's spring game, which we'll get to.
Had a great game.
Yeah, had a big
and
long
then
catch.
Immediately transferred.
Immediately left. And Shedeur Sanders, the presumed starting quarterback, Deion's son, went out of his way to compliment him. And he immediately leaves. So, yeah. Again, none of these are big-time surprises just because we don't know what's happening behind the scenes. And you give yourself a chance in the spring to like your place within a program. And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. Or if the money is too good in the portal, the alleged money, whatever, then you're going to see guys moving around. And you saw Ben Bryant last week, right?
Yeah.
Rumors of TVD, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There must be, we know there's a market for it. We know Florida needs a guy.
Yeah.
There are a lot of places that could use
Auburn,
a guy. Nick Saban,
sure.
We could talk about Nick Saban and the A-Day stuff, but Nick Saban not exactly giving a ringing endorsement for either of his two options currently on the roster. So there's definitely a market. If you're Ben Bryant, I mean, I don't know if the TVD stuff really picked up any other steam. I know it was a momentary rumor.
Right. I think it was solidified on social media for whatever that's worth, that he is staying, that he is a Cane for the foreseeable future.
But there is definitely a market out there, and I'm curious to see what other names go in the portal. Late in the game here, we've got about another week or so, another couple days, I should say. We're in the final week of the spring transfer window, which closes on April the 30th, and we'll see what other new names pop up in the interim.
Yeah, and it's also the season of coaches evaluating potential rosters that are over the 85-person limit and saying, okay, well, I'm going to invite these 4 people into my office and have a conversation about the future of their scholarship within the program. And so maybe that happens in the middle of spring ball. Maybe that happens after the spring game or whatever the spring game is for all of these teams. And so there are going to be more guys hitting the portal, and it's exactly why a lot of the savvier coaches across this sport perhaps hold some scholarships open post-spring.
I saw that. We talked about it briefly, but Southern Scrooge, Brian Kelly, taking away scholarships from.
I think it was Dabo. I looked at the wrong Tigers. That's on me. I looked at the wrong Tigers.
Can we still go with Southern Scrooge though as a thing?
I don't know, man. LSU looked pretty strong in their spring game. They got some good receivers, a good line. Jaden Daniels looking sharp. Like, Brian Kelly's got a glow about him now that he can wear shorts, as we talked about. You can do what you want to do, Ty. You have your own baggage, but things are looking pretty up right now at Baton Rouge.
So as we take the full steer into spring and transfers and whatnot, I understand you have a surprise sound for me today.
Oh, yeah. I just want to know what actually worries you, Ty.
I worry. I worry.
I was in the shower this morning. Let's get into too much information. I was like, all right, what's the first? There's lots of songs that talk about worry, lots of movie quotes. What's the first thing that comes to mind? And that was, for whatever reason, the opening, I think it's Clarity from John Mayer. Yeah. That's what came out, and I just followed that instinct, Ty. I tend to do that. So we'll go through a number of teams. Most everybody, I think, has played their spring games. Oregon, Maryland, somebody else I think you wrote down hasn't played theirs.
Yeah, there are 3 Power 5 teams that have not. There are some smaller schools, but Maryland, Rutgers, and Oregon play their games this coming Saturday on April the 29th. But all the other FBS schools, or Power 5 schools at least, have played their spring games or the scrimmages or showcases. They call it different things depending on where you go in the country. But most of the way through here.
Yeah, smart, by the way, of Oregon. By the way, just it can get, as we've mentioned, gray and gloomy in a number of places. It should be nice in Eugene, and if you're not competing with other schools to have visits for spring games and you can load up that visit list, pretty savvy of Oregon. So
not bad. Not bad.
I looked around the sport. I watched as much as I could. I read as much as I could, and I was most interested in quarterback battles and new coaches, new situations. Certainly, Ohio State with their quarterback battle, Alabama, whatever is going to happen at Colorado with Deion wearing a cowboy hat and making it a sort of a weird competitive game. But we saw Shedeur Sanders, we saw Travis Hunter. I don't think there was a ton to take away from the Colorado game because it just seemed like guys were running wide open. And
yeah, I think the takeaway was the optimism.
Sure, the energy in the stadium at Folsom Field on a snowy weekend day. Sure.
They turned that into a full-on spectacle.
Mm-hmm.
And, you can only buy so much with unbridled optimism. And, of course, everyone's undefeated in spring.
Yeah.
But it's been a while since anybody was able to breathe that kind of life into a program that was down on its luck. Let's be honest.
Yep.
This was not a good team last year. It was not in a good place. It hasn't been in a good place for a while. And so to inject that kind of excitement into a program is a really cool story in and of itself. I was looking through Colorado's schedule. I was looking through some of their prospects, even at trying to knock off TCU the start of the year. Of course, that's not likely. We know that.
Right.
But just that sense, that tinkling that you might feel kind of like on the backs of your ears looking at that matchup, knowing that teams that have this crazy self-belief and this crazy momentum can sometimes pull weird upsets in week one. I don't know. Colorado's interesting again, and I'm all for it.
Yeah. On one hand, you say, well, set expectations low. So then if you exceed them, it looks like a giant success. And even if Colorado struggles this year, you hope the energy and the force of personality and the recruiting classes to come are enough to sustain optimism from, the season ticket class, the donor class, the online class, whatever, the boosters in whatever fashion, because I do think it's going to be a rough year one. So
it's going to be rough. And so to that extent, I'm not worried about Colorado.
Sure.
I'm worried long-term about the Deion thing because I could totally see Deion blowing up, having a great season at some point in the next 3 years and then going elsewhere. Because Deion, I think,
that's
first
everybody.
and foremost. But Deion's about Deion and very openly about Deion.
Great.
That's just who the guy is. Yeah. If he can take Colorado to the promised land, that'd be great.
Yeah.
So bigger picture, I guess I worry about that. But in the short term, the bar here for success is very low in year one. So whatever we saw, I think is just gravy. I'm not worried about Colorado.
Yeah. And look, you can always sell. We've talked about this before. You can sell NFL track record if you're a school like Alabama. All these guys are getting drafted. Or you can sell every single spot on this roster is open. Every spot on the two deep is open. And so that's a big thing that Colorado should be able to sell in the next couple of years. I saw they had, we mentioned the transfer. I think they had a big decommitment of a blue chip guy, but it's again, not unique to Colorado, but the spotlight is just brighter because of Deion's name and force of personality. So, no, I'm hoping for good things because as a fan of West Coast football, whatever shape that takes in the years to come, a jolt of energy like Deion Sanders, I see as a very much positive thing for the conference. So even a competitive Colorado, because I've been to a Colorado game, I've been to a couple Colorado games when they've been good, it's a great thing for the conference. They have been the worst program in the Pac-12. And it's not especially close. They had a couple of like a year and a half of good Mike McIntyre, and otherwise they've been a stain on the conference, an embarrassment. So even if they leave the conference, good luck, Big 12, if Colorado is not able to improve. But for the time being, I think it's an overall positive thing that nationally people are going to tune in and pay attention to what Deion Sanders is doing in Boulder.
Who does worry you? What program does worry you after reading summaries of spring games, watching clips? Which situation does worry you?
I'm a little bit worried about Ole Miss at the moment, just because it seemed like Jackson Dart was going to be the medium-term guy, even with Walker Howard and Spencer Sanders coming in. I'm just never going to worry that much about a Lane Kiffin offense per se, especially when you're returning one of the best 2 or 3 running backs in the country, if not the best guy, in Quinshon Judkins. But they've lost a lot on defense, and they didn't show enough last year as they moved on from DJ Durkin to give me a ton of faith that the secondary, the linebacking situation. Like, I'm worried, not necessarily because of the spring game itself, but Jackson Dart wasn't especially sharp in the game. And so then if you're throwing in, okay, we're going with a recovered, hopefully Spencer Sanders or a totally green Walker Howard, that I think eventually they'll be very good on offense. But if they don't have that defense to lean on like they were able to do a couple of years ago, I don't know. I worry about Ole Miss more than I thought I would. Again, not because of the game, just because of the overall situation and what we didn't see necessarily from Jackson Dart.
Yeah, I could. You know who worries me?
Sorry, I had to get that in there.
I'm a little bit worried about Alabama.
Okay, explain why.
A little bit, smidge.
Okay.
And it is a worry focused almost entirely on the quarterback position. But the two contenders at present are Jalen Milroe and Ty Simpson, and both of them struggled on A-Day.
Sure.
Saban, they asked him after the game, I think trying to get him to hint as to whether or not he would take on a transfer quarterback. He did not endorse either guy. And he seemed to indicate that, what we already know, this is a cutthroat organization, and we want the best player to play quarterback. We want the best player at every position that we can get. I picked up strong signals from what he was saying that they might go to the portal to try and find somebody else because he was not seeing what he wanted from either guy. Bear in mind, this is also a Alabama offense that has a new coordinator in Tommy Rees. They're paying him handsomely, brought him down from Notre Dame. But at this point, to not have a quarterback, it feels like new territory for Alabama. We're so used to there being an heir apparent.
Right.
So used to guys transferring out of Alabama because they're blocked on the depth chart. But what we haven't seen is wanting to bring somebody in that could potentially fill the void. Now, there's a lot of time. Jalen Milroe had moments last year. We didn't see a whole lot from Ty Simpson, right? But there is time for these guys to develop. I'm not going to rush to judgment here and say that they're definitely going to go out in the portal, but I don't know. That seems like new territory. Every time we have new territory with Nick Saban, he far exceeds expectations. Turnover has not been a problem for this guy. He always finds a way to integrate new coaches, new players swimmingly.
Right.
That's just what he does. And we have seen high impact transfers come at other positions. Jahmyr Gibbs had a pretty good season. Maybe not quite the season, like a Heisman caliber season, like some had talked up last season. But clearly he's good enough to integrate whoever, and the support staff is there, and whoever they put in is going to be
I honestly think he was just overshadowed a little bit by how good Bryce Young was and how much he had to do. But yeah. Absolutely the case. Yeah.
But I just feel like this is new territory in a sense. And it's a lot to ask if you're going to integrate a guy this late in the game into a new offense with a new supporting cast. That's not to say Alabama's going to go 8-4. Of course not. But just something to keep your eye on. I'm a little bit worried.
Well, okay, so it's easy at this point to look back at Tua and Bryce Young and Mac Jones and the best of Jalen Hurts, and that was until it was not as good. When Jalen Hurts struggled going downfield, struggled against Georgia in that first half of the national championship game before transferring, that it's easy. Like, Alabama has been faced with having quarterbacks who are not going to be fully responsible for winning games, whether it's Jake Coker or Blake Sims or, AJ McCarron was a good quarterback. Greg McElroy was certainly accurate but more of a game manager. And so in this new era of Alabama, and it's going to be a marriage of what Tommy Rees wants to do on offense and what has worked for them these past few years. I know there's a lot made of like, this is a new Alabama offense. I think there's going to be elements of what has worked for them these past few years. But it's easy to forget that they have not had Heisman caliber quarterbacks and won a lot of games doing so. I think, did Jake Coker overlap, with Derrick Henry, I want to say. And so that's nice. Is there an obvious star in the backfield in the way there has been at running back these past few years for Alabama? I guess it depends on how you feel about Jace McClellan. It's just that there's so much new for Alabama, right? It's the new starting quarterback. It's the new offensive coordinator. It's that new, even though they bring back a lot at receiver, there's that who is going to be that new absolute star, that gravitational player, right? And so the offensive line is in a good place, which you'd like to have with so much new on this side of the ball. I echo what you say. I think they're going to be fine. But we just saw Mac Jones break records. Tua look incredible and Heisman worthy. Bryce Young, as we record, this might be the number 1 overall pick and was an absolute magician at going downfield, improvising, buying himself time. And so you're right. When you don't have that clear heir apparent, you start to worry if you're an Alabama fan.
There's a vacuum of sorts, and they're going to fill it with somebody good, I'm sure, but just something to keep.
This is where Tommy Rees makes his money. This is where
Tommy
if
Rees,
he is the boy genius that he is purported to be, which I think he's a smart coordinator. I didn't love some of the stuff he did with Ian Book, and last year I don't put on him, but if he's that boy genius, he will find mismatches, he will find holes in defenses, and whoever it is at quarterback, Ty Simpson, Jalen Milroe, or a transfer, will be put in a wonderful position to succeed.
Who else worries you?
Good question. I'm a little bit, I'm not really worried about A&M because of quarterback or offense. In their spring game, they were down a bunch of players, and I think they've got good weapons in the backfield. Obviously, Evan Stewart, you're now talking about one of the best receivers in the country, likely. I think Connor Wegman's going to be good. They have depth with Max Johnson still there. The defense worries me a little bit. The defense, because of where they were last year against the run, because of where they are at linebacker, they have a good secondary, but it's not especially deep. I liked what I saw from the offense, and we really don't know what Bobby Petrino is going to do with this offense that's so different from Jimbo Fisher, that they were going downfield in the spring game, that they were taking shots. So I guess I'm a little bit worried about the defense, but that's a semi-worry. I'm not really there because that line at getting after the passer should be incredible and should be able to cover up for some. How about Wisconsin? Does that worry you when you saw the interceptions and the sloppiness at times from that offense, or no?
I mean, marginally, you don't want to see it. However, it is a new system.
Yeah.
It is new, and there's a lot of new at Wisconsin as well.
Yeah.
And so whenever there's that level of new, especially in spring, I tend to let it breathe a little bit before I really worry.
Okay. What about Florida, if we're going to connect the two pieces to Graham Mertz?
I'm worried about Florida. I'm worried. So the story of the Florida spring game, I think, was one of a mixed bag. Defensively, and we talked, we did a whole Florida show.
Yeah.
Defensively, Florida actually looked pretty good.
They're an interesting play. And I like the coordinator a lot, Austin Armstrong. It looks like they're going to be more decisive on defense. How about that?
Defensively, I thought was a big time bright spot.
Mm-hmm.
And again, Florida's got talent. It seems like Florida will be okay on the ground. They were okay last year. But the quarterback thing is going to be kind of messy.
Mm-hmm.
Both Graham Mertz and Jack Miller were unimpressive in that Florida game. It was a sloppy showing, to say the least.
Mm-hmm.
Billy Napier said that they still expect to add another quarterback to the roster before they break camp in the fall. So they are very much in the market for a guy in the portal. Names at this juncture are kind of scant. I mean, we've heard rumors about guys who might throw their hat in.
Sure.
But not a whole lot really outside of Ben Bryant, right? I mean, it's just been kind of slow on that front, and we're running out of time here. By the time this podcast sees the light of day, we're recording this a couple days early, there is a chance that there could be more names out there. So with that qualifier, I'll just say that Florida needs a guy. And, I'm not sure that Graham Mertz is going to be the answer. Obviously, they thought they were going to get Jaden Rashada in this cycle.
But even if you have to count on a true freshman immediately, you're still not in a good place.
You're not in a great place, but it would have given them more options at least.
Yeah.
And so to the extent that hurt, I guess we'll find out once they break camp in the fall. But yeah, that the position, the quarterback position and their depth at quarterback really does worry me a little bit. And if they're not able to reel in somebody significant on the portal, that will be worrying.
Sure.
It just will. I don't know if Graham Mertz is ever going to live up to the hype that he came to Wisconsin with.
He hasn't.
He hasn't.
It's not,
he hasn't.
I think
he's got another shot here. He's got another shot.
I don't know.
I don't think Jack Miller's the guy.
No, he's not.
So if it's not Graham Mertz, and if there's not a big transfer in the works, the Florida offense could be very one-dimensional this fall.
Okay, so as we know, there's the portal window is opened, right? That we are going to see guys who are beaten out potentially at big places. We've talked about big places. I think we're going to talk about Ohio State next, where Jack Miller originated from in the portal. That there are going to be names. You mentioned Ben Bryant. They're just going to be names, and sometimes it's a matter of finishing up schoolwork to be a grad transfer if that's the route, and you finish it up with the spring semester or whatever. So I think Florida is going to be aggressive. We saw Hugh Freeze talk about Auburn, saying that we are going to, turn over every rock, and there's no room that's safe from adding, somebody if they're a cultural fit or whatever. So I'm not worried about Florida overall. I'm worried about Florida's offense. I'm worried about Florida at quarterback if this is what the room looks like come September. But no, I think there are just going to be more and more names. I think that's the reality of the world in which we live now. I think there are upgrades out there. I do, Ty. I think there are upgrades to be had as we finish this spring season, but then you're going to count on a quarterback who arrives in July, and he is going to come in and start immediately and be comfortable and have extensive experience, studying and executing the playbook. You're still going to look at somebody, even if they're better, as somewhat limited, at least for the first part of the season.
Ohio State.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Ohio State. Ohio State, another one of these big time programs that has a quarterback battle, a true quarterback battle on its hands, presumably between Kyle McCord and Devin Brown.
Mm-hmm.
Both guys went through the whole spring practice cycle, 15 practices. Ryan Day not ready to make a decision even after their spring game. It is notable that Devin Brown did not play in that spring game. He needed finger surgery.
Oh, okay.
So not ready to name a guy yet. But we did see a lot of Kyle McCord. He looked good. He played in front of 75,000 people, which shout out to all of our Ohio State fans out there, all the Buckeyes, for making that event as cool as possible. Just awesome to see that. But Kyle McCord looked good.
But the way you say that, your shoulders are shrugging a little bit. And look, Justin Fields didn't look like the killer that he would morph into in his first spring game as the presumed starter. But I think there's some questions.
Oh, there are definitely questions, but the questions in my mind are more just kind of curiosities as opposed to real genuine worries, because we know that the backfield again will be loaded. We know that the receiver room is going to be unparalleled.
Yeah.
It's going to be unparalleled in college football next season.
Yeah.
I mean, that is going to be worth the price of admission on its own. He'll have a pretty good line in front of him, whether it's...
There's some questions, but I think it'll be okay. Yeah.
It'll be fine. Whether it's McCord, whether it's Brown, in some universe, if Florida or Georgia decides that they're going to give the job to Carson Beck and Brock Vandegrift wants to transfer to Ohio State. Again, this is a hype. I don't know.
Yeah.
But in some universe where Ohio State takes a transfer, if it's that guy, whoever you plug and play into that spot, filling in for CJ Stroud, who's also going to be a high draft pick in this weekend's draft, they will be just fine. So I am not at all worried about Ohio State. I thought Kyle McCord definitely showed enough to leave me feeling reassured going into this season if he's the guy. I will add on a personal note, because I know he's more of a local guy here in the Eastern PA area. I'm very interested to see Kyle McCord on this level. I've been waiting.
Is he Philly area? Is that where he's from?
Philly area. Yeah. I've been waiting for the opportunity to see him play for Ohio State, and I'm excited to see him play if he is the guy with these receivers. I think it'll be an incredible opportunity for him.
Yeah, and if Brian Hartline isn't making big-time decisions at 2 a.m. for this offense, they'll be in a great place. If they have a grown-up at offensive coordinator, they'll be in a great place. I think Ryan Day is going to have a lot more responsibility than he sort of indicated at the end of last season over this offense. But yeah, no, I'm not especially worried about Ohio State getting into a groove on offense, but if Kyle McCord is simply good and not excellent, I don't know how much closer that gets them to beating Michigan this year.
Just don't turn the ball over. Just don't turn the ball over.
Yeah.
Don't turn the ball over. Make sure you can hit your weapons.
Yeah.
But yeah, the question on the Michigan side will be, what are they going to do in defense? Like, how are they going to stop that Michigan ground game?
Sure.
It's going to be the same offense that it's been the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Maybe with some new wrinkles, but
yeah. They've got strong defensive linemen coming back, highlighted by Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimalu. Linebacker, I think, will be improved, and there's experience there. Secondary, we'll see. And it's the depth should be excellent there. But yeah, you're absolutely right that and it's not even just the defense against Michigan as we preview the Ohio State-Michigan game in late April. It's going to be the offense staying in a rhythm and not getting off the field quickly like they did in that game at times last season.
Who else worries you?
Who else worries me at this moment?
Or doesn't worry you at this moment?
I'm a little worried about TCU. I'm a little bit worried that in the shadow of what they did last year, and we talked about this last week with Parker when we did our TCU year one debrief, the number of new things, and I know Sonny Dykes has his offensive experience, but you bring in, you turn to Baylor, he says like an idiot, with Kendall Briles, obviously having stopped since then. You turn to a new offensive coordinator and a new full-time starting quarterback, even though Chandler Morris was named that last year before getting hurt. A new backfield with DeMarcado and Kendra Miller going to the NFL, with Quentin Johnston moving on to the NFL, with so many new offensive pieces. And now TCU has been very active in the portal. I just worry that there's so much novel and there's so much in the way of heightened expectations that TCU, upon further examination, I thought Chandler Morris was good in the spring game. I thought he made some interesting throws. There's just so much new that, like, okay, is it going to be a Trey Sanders, Amani Bailey? Are they immediately going to come in? That worries me a little bit from this spring upon further reflection, that I'm like, oh man, I'm a little bit worried about TCU in a very, very top heavy or competitive heavy conference, that I'm more worried than I was before I kind of watched the spring game than I was before, if that's English.
I'm not sold on Chandler Morris.
Yeah, I think he's fine.
Sold. Yeah. He was a great story.
Yeah.
2 years ago for a moment in time. And I understand the optimism around him. I think he's fine. I'm just not sold. I think the bar now is higher for success at TCU. You get to a championship game, people tend to think of your program a little differently. Your fans, people that aren't fans that just follow from afar, certainly recruits, right? Regardless of what Parker has to say about the fan base, not necessarily recalibrating its expectations, which is a very responsible way to be, by the way. I probably would not be that responsible if I were a fan of TCU. But you get to a certain point, there is an expectation now that you're going to get back to that point. I'm not sure Chandler Morris is that guy. We'll see.
Can I give you, as it relates to TCU or a team related to TCU, can I give you a team that I am embarrassingly not worried about?
Texas. I'm not either. I was going to bring that up
I'm so
next.
scared, Ty. I'm so scared to have this kind of optimism because Quinn Ewers was very young last year. He transferred. He skipped his senior year of high school. And so having that full off season, having the experience, now getting the full rhythm as the number one guy, Arch Manning was never going to take his job. And I never really considered anything either way about Arch Manning in the spring game. That, okay, he struggled a little bit throwing to walk-ons. Who cares? There is something about this now year 3 of the Sark era, adding speed on both sides of the ball. I think Pete Kwiatkowski is a real ass defensive coordinator and have thought so for a long time. I thought you're stacking great classes. And look, we fall into this seductive point with the last 7 Texas coach, whatever, right? Because they're always stacking these classes. But there is something about the quarterbacks on the roster, the offensive line improving these past couple years, the defense and how they showed out last year, very quietly improving to a really good place, and then adding another amount of depth to the defense. That I'm in the early stages of allowing myself to be flirted with. How about that, Ty? With Texas,
you're saying Texas is back. Texas might be back. Texas could be back.
I'm just
That's
feeling.
That's what you're saying.
Especially. I'm feeling a rapport, Ty. That's all I'm saying.
You're saying Texas is back?
No. But I like Jonte Cook, right? I like guys that they're adding on both of these sides of the ball. Now they lose perhaps the most dynamic running back in the sport in Bijan Robinson. But I don't know. I think their line's going to be fine. I think they've added good talent there. And
I'm really optimistic.
You talk about
Texas.
A.D. Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, Jonte Cook, the 5-star receiver. You have options if you're Texas in a way that they haven't.
I'm really into Texas this year. I love the fact that Sark came out and said, maybe stating the obvious, that Quinn Ewers is going to be the guy. But I like that he ended that. I like that he didn't drag that out just for the purposes of, there's a Manning on the roster now. I like that he did that. Give us some clarity. Let the team know who the guy's going to be. The team already knew who the guy was going to be, but just Just say it, give him that confidence. I like that he did that.
I'm going to need to see them turn over a new leaf in second halves of games next year, though.
It's not fully solved, but the talent is assembling. It feels like the program is going to a place. The only thing that worries me is that Malik Murphy is going to transfer. Like maybe he'll go to Florida or maybe he'll go somewhere back home in California.
Yeah.
I don't know, but he, to me, and I wrote this in the newsletter as well, he, to me, was really the story of the Texas spring thing. He looked really, really good.
No, he looked, the big thing about Malik Murphy, again, it doesn't really matter what you do if you're playing against, the second or third team defense and you're throwing to second or third string receivers, whatever, is what you want to see from quarterbacks is command, poise, and decisiveness. And he looked, especially going downfield, knowing when to go downfield and just immediately spotting those one-on-one matchups or knowing when to check down. Again, we can go revisit this audio at another point in time, but the early images of Malik Murphy getting that time now with time in the system is, he can be a real Power 5 quarterback.
Oh, yeah.
He was a 4-star guy, which is not a surprise, but like when you actually see it, you're like, he will be valuable to Texas or somebody sooner rather than later.
I thought he looked really good.
Yeah.
So that would worry me because, he transfers, Arch Manning's your backup.
Yeah.
Probably not the worst thing in the world, but, I think that's just a situation worth monitoring, but I feel pretty good about Texas.
Also, if Quinn Ewers pops this year, he's going to go pro, right? Because this will be his third year out of high
right.
school because he enrolled early. So
that's right.
The timing works out for Malik Murphy. You sit a couple of years and you be the next, Texas quarterback, which is a huge job. But yeah, I think things are lining up pretty well at the moment. Yep. I say cautiously for Texas.
I felt pretty good about Florida State.
Yeah, and they didn't play a lot of key guys in the spring game.
Didn't play a lot of key guys, but it was like the defensive line was a wrecking ball and dictated the terms. So they looked good on defense. Clemson looked really good on defense.
Yeah.
Clemson's defense will be crazy loaded this season. Mm-hmm. Cade Klubnik was fine. He had 2 picks, but I'm not going to read too much into that. Feel okay about both those situations. I feel okay about Georgia. I'm going to talk too much about Georgia.
Carson Beck.
Yeah, Carson Beck's the dude. It seems like he's got a clear lead at this point over Brock Vandegrift, as I said earlier. Only missed 3 passes, had like 230 and a touchdown. He looked the part. Mm-hmm. Very much had a command of things. Sam Hartman, my man Sam.
Yeah.
My man Sam. After a series of spring practices that seemingly touted the development of Tyler Buckner, Buckner struggled and Sam Hartman was the story.
Sure.
13 of 16, 189 yards, 2 touchdowns, clearly stole the show. True freshman Jaden Greathouse had 13 targets, 11 catches.
Was he like a big touted dude?
Yeah, comes from Austin.
Okay.
Westlake High School, right?
Yep,
a known
prolific.
High school in college football ranks. He steps in and immediately had a rapport with Hartman. So would not surprise me if he ends up being a name to a great name, literally. Jaden Greathouse, 6'1", 213. He's built in a sturdy fashion. Hartman was talking up his hands.
Yeah.
I think he could be a guy that really steps in the receiver room. Notre Dame's brought in talent. They're losing Lorenzo Styles, by the way, who's going to the portal.
As a corner or a DB of some kind, which I think he came to Notre Dame as originally.
Yep, he's going to the portal to try and get some playing time elsewhere. But as for the receiver room, this was, I think, a glimmer of hope, because we've been wondering for a while who's going to be the dude who's going to step up. Obviously, the quarterback talent has been a concern over the last couple seasons, but, Sam Hartman definitely lived up to the billing, at least in limited action here in this Notre Dame spring game. So I felt good about that.
It's a good school to be an incoming talented receiver at, with Sam Hartman's like clear white glove ready to come in and throw for a bajillion yards. He's been one of the sports best handful of quarterbacks these past couple of years. And so if there are targets to be had, good to be a Notre Dame receiver in 2023.
Yeah. Pete Sampson, I forget the exact phrasing, but he said initially it looked like Sam Hartman had 9 practices with Notre Dame. And after playing in the spring game, it looked like a guy who was in his 6th year of college football or whatever it is for Sam Hartman. He clearly showed his experience.
Did they do slow mesh stuff?
I didn't see.
With the new coordinator?
I hope not.
Okay.
I can't imagine they would do that. Don't do
Why?
that.
That's
to
what
me,
he's so
guy.
comfortable doing. You got to make things a little bit comfortable for him.
Well, then get him a nice dorm or something, but don't do that.
Dorm. Come on.
Yeah.
He has a McMansion at some point. You're talking about Northern Indiana. He can, if he's making some cash, he's set. All right. I don't know if there's anybody else specifically that I'm out and out worried about after spring.
What are you? Let's close with
spring,
this. What are you watching on the Oregon side? Because they're late in this cycle. What worries you, if anything, about the Ducks?
A lot of new faces on defense. I'm not worried about the offensive line. I'm a little bit worried about what the offense looks like under a new coordinator and Will Stein, just because everything else seems kind of plug and play on offense. The running game is intact. Bo Nix returns. They return their best receiver, and their starting tight end, Ferguson, he's hurt, and he'll be back for fall camp, though. I think their offensive line will be fine. The worry is no different than what it was last year. It's getting stops, it's getting after the quarterback. And so whether it's Jordan Birch, whether it's Mateo Uiagalelei stepping in, the 5-star freshman, it's going to be getting to the quarterback and who the first cornerback, who the best linebacker is going to be, because they're just replacing guys that popped from last year. And so it's, okay, these are their new starters on defense. Are they closer to confusing and shutting down Michael Penix and Caleb Williams? If yes,
Right.
Wonderful. If no, I hope they are by the time they have to play Michael Penix and Caleb Williams and DJU and, whatever Cam Rising's health is when they play Utah. So it hasn't changed since the end of last season, but it's how well do they work in so many new guys on both sides of the ball? And what does Bo Nix look like? Is he closer to 2022 Bo Nix or 2021 Bo Nix with a new coordinator? That's all.
Let us know on social media who worries you
Yeah.
and who doesn't worry you. Yeah, let us know in that John Mayer voice. Play that one more time.
In that John Mayer voice.
Just give it to me one more time.
In the YouTube comments, right in brackets, John Mayer voice. I'm worried about
That's our secret verbal here.
Tennessee's health
John
along
Mayer
the
voice.
defensive line. Yeah.
If you know to use the Mayer voice, then we can.
You see Nico, by the way? Yamaleva for Tennessee?
Which you phonetically spelled out in our notes
I did.
document
Yeah.
for me. I'm still going to get it wrong. I apologize.
Yeah, Tennessee didn't play a bunch of guys. I'm not worried about Tennessee because their system's in place, and I think they're building up interesting depth on defense. But Nico, on the run, couple big throws. You can see it. You can see it where, he might just be Nico in a year and a half. He might have that one in the way that we had with Tua. Maybe it's because of the lack of confidence in our last name pronunciation. But Nico is going to be
a little bit of the clouds parting when he
good.
throws.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm into it.
Let us know, again, in the Mayor voice, who worries you, who doesn't worry you, across social media, solidverbal@gmail.com. As always is the email address. We appreciate any and all feedback. Don't forget to check out verballers.com, verballers.com. That is our Patreon, where you can further support what Dan and I do on an ongoing basis. 2 public episodes. We also offer bonus stuff. Again, where, Dan?
Verballers.com, verballers.com.
Thank you to one and all for your undying support here throughout the course of the off season. We'll be back soon. In the meantime, for that guy over there, my good friend Dan Rubenstein, for myself, Ty Hildenbrandt. Thanks again, and stay solid.
Peace.